The sky above Virex's 9 burned an unnatural green, streaked with crimson fire as the storm rolled in. Acid rain hissed against the jagged canopy, turning leaves into black sludge before they hit the ground. Ravina Kale plunged through the waist-deep marsh, every step splashing corrosive water onto her already scorched armor. The air was thick with the chemical tang of dissolution, the sound of plasma fire snapping through the downpour like angry whips. This was supposed to have been simple. Catch a runaway alien prisoner, drag him back for the bounty, and get off this cursed death world before the storm season peaked. That was the plan. But as soon as she stepped into the clearing at the coordinates, the world turned on its head. No target, no prisoner, only her squadmates, their visors reflecting her shape before the first bolt punched straight into her chest plate. The impact lifted her off her feet, sending a spray of molten metal and acid water into the air. Her HUD screamed warnings. Armor breach, suit integrity compromised, oxygen contamination. The second volley was aimed to kill. She threw herself behind a crumbling pillar of petrified wood, the edges sizzling where plasma met ancient resin. "Why?" she gasped, the comlink still open. No one answered. She only heard the rhythmic, clinical sound of them reloading. Another shot hammered the pillar, splitting it in half. She knew she wouldn't last another 30 seconds pinned here. Behind her, the ground sloped sharply into a fissure. A bad drop, too deep to see the bottom, but maybe better than a firing squad. Plasma burst again. She jumped. The fall tore the breath from her lungs. Metal scraped rock. Sparks flew from her armor, and then she hit hard, rolling into choking darkness. The roar of the storm above became distant, replaced by a low, resonant hum. A visor flickered back online, just enough light to paint the walls around her, slick, pulsating surfaces threaded with alien conduits glowing sickly blue. Chains clinked in the shadows, and then it moved. A mass of muscle and scaled armor uncoiled from the far wall, each shift of its body scraping metal on stone. The Zyrian Serpent, she knew the name from whispered mercenary. Legends, was easily 20 meters long, its body bound in luminous shackles of neural control tech. Twin eyes, molten gold and unblinking, locked onto her. Something in that gaze wasn't mere predation, it was searching. A rumble passed through the ground as her pursuers arrived above. Boots pounded. She heard the commander's voice, one she used to trust, call down orders in a clipped alien tongue. Then came the clatter of canisters hitting stone. They burst open, spilling a flood of corrosive liquid into the fissure. The hiss was immediate, relentless, eating through stone like it was ice. She tried to scramble back, but her injured leg buckled. The acid tide surged closer, radiating heat even through her suit's failing seals. The serpent shifted, and for a heartbeat she thought it would strike. Instead, it lunged forward toward her, but not with fangs. It racked its massive body between her and the advancing acid, taking the brunt of the chemical burn along its scales. The chains sparked violently at the strain, and the creature let out a guttural hiss, more pain than rage. Before she could move, its head lowered until the ridged crown of its skull pressed firmly against her forehead. Her vision blurred. The darkness around them collapsed into a whirl of fractured light. Images slammed into her mind, memories not her own. Surgical tables surrounded by alien silhouettes, their hands sunk into living tissue. A starship drifting helpless in orbit before being consumed by green fire. The serpent thrashing against restraints, its roar echoing through the void. And beneath it all, a deep, enduring hatred that burned hotter than any sun she had ever seen. She tried to pull away, but the connection only deepened. Her pulse matched its slow, thunderous heartbeat. A voice. No, not quite a voice. More like thought shaped into sound, spoke in the hollow between her own thoughts. You are not like them. Her own inner voice came sharp, reflexive. It will kill you. It will kill you. Another part of her, the part that had gotten her this far through too many close calls, answered back, or you'll die like someone who never dared to gamble. The acid was still rising, steam filling the air. Her HUD blurred, alarms overlapping into useless static. The serpent's eyes held hers, and in that stare was something terrifying, not mercy, but recognition. The rumble of boots above grew fainter. Either they thought the acid had done its work, or they didn't care what happened next. Her body felt weightless. The last thing she saw was the serpent's pupils narrowing to slits before a surge of alien. Electricity ripped through her skull. Pain and light consumed everything, and the world went black. When her senses finally cut out completely, it wasn't with the sharp finality of unconsciousness. It was the slow, inevitable pull of being dragged somewhere she had no map for, into a bond she had no hope of breaking. Ravina woke to the sound of her own breath rasping against her visor and the slow, wet sound of something shifting across stone. Her armor was blackened and split along one side, the plating pitted from the acid rain, but she was alive. She flexed her left hand and felt the tacky resistance of the wound across her ribs. When she looked down, she saw the faint shimmer of a translucent gel sealing the injury, thick, iridescent fluid that hissed faintly where it met her armor's edges. It wasn't human medigel. It was something else. The cave was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness, lit only by the cold glow of alien shackles embedded into the rock. And there, only a few meters away, the Zyrian serpent lay coiled, its body half shrouded in shadow. Massive, scarred scales caught the dim light, each etched with burns and strange, jagged patterns that might have been wounds or deliberate marks. Its golden eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to reach for her sidearm, except the weapon was gone, probably lying somewhere in the marsh above, dissolved into useless slag. Ravina pushed herself up against the wall, keeping her gaze locked on the creature. Her mind raced, grasping for context. She remembered the betrayal, the fall, the flood of alien memories forced into her skull. She remembered pain, hers and something else's. She didn't remember agreeing to be alive. She had been born on a mining outpost in the border sector, the kind of place that appeared on star charts only as a footnote in supply chain ledgers. Life there was dust, noise, and the constant vibration of drills in the bedrock. Her father used to say the planet had a heartbeat, but that was before the Vothran fleet came. Ravina could still see the sky splitting apart, the warships blotting out the suns, the ground trembling under orbital strikes. She was 17 when she watched her mother and father vanish in a wall of plasma fire. She'd never forgiven herself for not being able to pull them away in time. The military had been her escape and her weapon. As a special forces operative in the Human Alliance, she'd fought in places where maps were just rumors and survival was its own kind of currency. But the day she was ordered to cleanse a village of unarmed colonists because intelligence claimed one might be, harboring an insurgent, was the day she turned her rifle on her own commander. She didn't kill him, though sometimes she wished she had. The Alliance court-martial stripped her of rank, weapon, and purpose. She walked away with nothing but the conviction that she would never again be part of a system that murdered to maintain power. Vothran was still out there, rising higher with every campaign, consolidating alien warlords into something bigger and crueler. His latest obsession was the Moon Ark 3, the last habitable refuge for thousands of human refugees in this quadrant. He wanted it not for its land or resources, but because destroying it would break the spine of human resistance in the region. And now, somewhere on this death world, he was stockpiling a new weapon, one built from the venom of the thing lying in front of her. The serpent shifted slightly, its chains clinking against the stone. A faint pulse throbbed in Ravina's skull, like a knock against the inside of her mind. She gritted her teeth, but the sensation persisted, curling into her consciousness until she could no longer tell where her thoughts ended and the intruders began. Images flickered in the corners of her vision, white surgical light reflecting on curved metal tools. Alien hands driving spikes into living muscle, tubes siphoning liquid that shimmered an impossible green. The hiss of pain, no, rage, was unmistakable. Her breath caught. The images weren't hers, they were the serpent's memories, bleeding into her through whatever had happened when it touched her before she blacked out. The bond was weak but undeniable, and it carried an emotion that hit her harder than the pictures, pure, unfiltered hatred. Another pulse in her head, and then a voice, not in her ears but woven into the current of her own thoughts. It was deep, slow, like stone grinding against stone, the words halting as if dragged across a language barrier. "You are not like them." Ravina's muscles tensed. "I didn't ask you to dig around in my head," she muttered aloud, unsure if it would even understand. The voice came again, faint but firm. "Not their smell. Not their rot." She realized with a cold twist in her gut that it could smell the difference between her and the aliens who had imprisoned it. "I'm not them," she said, her voice sharper now. "And I hate them just as much as you do." The serpent's pupils contracted slightly, a ripple of something. Recognition. Maybe, passing through its gaze. Ravina exhaled slowly, her mind turning over the implications. Vothran's weapon wasn't a device. It was this creature. They were extracting its venom to create something that could melt through starship hulls like butter. She didn't know if the serpent understood the scale of that threat, but she did. If Vothran took Archie 3, it would be the end of human resistance in this sector. Her objectives crystallized. She had two goals now: assassinate Vothran and destroy whatever bioweapon he was building. The problem was the weapon was sitting right in front of her, breathing slow and steady, its eyes still locked on her like it was deciding what to do with the strange, wounded thing in its cage. "Looks like we've both been used," she said, half to herself. Another image slid unbidden into her mind of the serpent's coils crushing a metal corridor, of acid spray igniting in zero gravity, of an alien captain screaming as his ship came apart. She didn't recoil from the vision. She let it sit, memorizing the angles, the feel of its movement. She didn't know if this bond could be trusted. She only knew two things. Vorthrin had to die, and she couldn't do it alone. The serpent's gaze didn't waver. "Hate them." "Good," Ravina said quietly. "Then we might just have a reason to work together." The cave mouth yawned before them, a jagged wound in the cliffside that opened into the acid-washed forest beyond. The storm had moved further east, but the air was still heavy with chemical mist that clung to Ravina's armor like invisible chains. The serpent slid forward first, its massive coils moving in silence except for the faint hiss of acid sizzling off the protective slime coating its scales. Ravina followed, her boots sinking into the soft, corroded ground. Visor filters working overtime to keep the toxic haze from burning her lungs. They moved through the skeletal remains of trees whose bark had long since dissolved, leaving only hollow trunks twisted into grotesque shapes. Every step forward was a battle between balance and speed. The serpent seemed unaffected by the terrain, gliding between blackened roots with predatory grace. Ravina kept her rifle salvaged from a dead mercenary in the cave ready, though she doubted it would matter against the things that hunted here. An hour into their trek, movement flickered on the horizon. Ravina crouched low, signaling the serpent to halt. "Ah!" Through the shifting mist, she spotted the unmistakable silhouette of armored transports, sleek alien carriers with reinforced tanks mounted along their sides. As they rolled closer, the tanks caught the weak light, revealing swirling green liquid inside. Even at this distance, she could see it shimmer with a volatile energy she'd only ever seen once before, on the battlefield where an entire human battalion had been erased in seconds. She felt the serpent's mind brush against hers, an unspoken recognition. The venom was its own, harvested and weaponized. She could almost taste its anger, sharp, metallic, and dangerously tempting. The convoy moved with purpose, flanked by 4 skimmer drones scanning the tree line. Their destination was obvious, the launch platform that would ferry the Venom to Vorthrin's orbital command. From there, it would become the spine of his assault fleet. A sudden crackle of static cut through the air inside her helmet. She froze. No one had access to her old Alliance comm codes, no one who should still be alive. The voice came low, steady, with the faintest echo of familiarity. "If you want to live, cut the link. No one keeps their mind when the Xyrian serpent opens the door." Her grip on the rifle tightened. "Who is this?" Silence for a heartbeat, then, "Someone who's seen what it does to people, and someone who won't be here to scrape you off the floor when it's done with you." The transmission ended, leaving only the hum of her suit's filters and the faint sound of the serpent's scales, shifting against wet soil. The words lodged themselves deep in her skull. No one keeps their mind. She knew the warning wasn't baseless. She could already feel the serpent's presence in her thoughts, nudging at memories she'd kept buried, testing the edges of her control. If she severed the connection now, killed it before it grew stronger, she could walk away. She could take the intel she had and still make a move against Vorthrin. But she also knew the truth. No weapon in the human arsenal could match the raw, destructive potential of the creature beside her. Alone, she was one more fugitive on a dying planet. With it, she might actually have a chance. The serpent's eyes caught the dim light as it turned its head toward her, as though it had heard every thought. "Doubt!" The voice slid into her mind, tasting the word. "I don't trust anyone," she said aloud, voice rough behind the visor. "Not even you!" Its pupils narrowed, and the mental voice came again, heavier this time. "Trust or die." The simplicity of it rattled her. This wasn't negotiation. It was the cold logic of a predator who had survived by choosing the only path that kept it alive. She looked back toward the convoy, the Venom tanks glowing faintly through the haze. Every second they hesitated was another second the weapon got closer to launch. She could take a shot, try to blow one of the tanks from here, but the drones would lock on, and she doubted she could outrun them. With the serpent, maybe. She turned back to it, their eyes meeting. "If you're going to help me, it has to be now." The serpent's coils shifted, the faint ripple of muscle under scale betraying anticipation. It didn't give her words, only the surge of emotion, anger, hunger, and a satisfaction that felt disturbingly like hers. Ravina steadied her breath. Every instinct from her training screamed at her to cut the link, to keep her mind her own. But the voice in the comm was gone, and the enemy convoy was rolling toward the sky. She had no time for second-guessing. "Fine," she muttered. "Let's see if we can make them regret keeping you alive." The serpent's head dipped slightly, almost a nod, before it slid forward into the mist. Ravina followed close, her boots splashing silently in the shallow pools of acid water. Somewhere, deep in her mind, The creature's presence shifted, less invasive now, more aligned, as if it understood that choice had been made. The convoy was less than 200 meters ahead when she broke into a run. The Serpent surged beside her, its body cutting through the fog in complete silence until they were nearly on top of the rear transport. Ravina raised the rifle, and in the same instant, the Serpent struck, its massive body slamming into the lead drone, shattering it in a spray of sparks. The jungle erupted in chaos. Drones swerved, lights flaring, transports grinding to a halt as alien guards poured out. Ravina's first shot punched through the visor of a guard before he could raise his weapon. The Serpent's tail swept another into the acid pool, his armor dissolving instantly. It was working. They were fighting as one. But the thought of the voice's warning lingered, heavy in her chest. If this bond grew any stronger, she might not be able to tell where she ended and the Serpent began. She didn't have the luxury to dwell on it now. The battle was already theirs to win or lose, and the Venom tanks weren't going to destroy themselves. The convoy moved in a tight column, 4 armored transports flanked by a swarm of drones and 2 skimmer bikes scouting ahead. Through the shifting haze, Ravina watched from the jagged lip of a broken ridge, her visor marking every target, every angle of approach. The Serpent lay coiled behind her in the shallow depression of the ridge's shadow, its scales slick with acidic moisture, its golden eyes locked on the Venom tanks rolling below. She could feel it through the link. Its focus was absolute. Its hunger not for the contents of those tanks, but for the lives of the creatures guarding them. The emotion bleeding through the bond was like standing too close to a furnace, rage so old it had calcified into instinct. "On my mark," she whispered, though she knew it didn't need the words. Below, the convoy hit the narrowest point in the ravine. Rocks jutted out like teeth on both sides, forcing the vehicles to slow. The perfect kill zone. Ravina raised her rifle, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. The first shot punched clean to the visor of the lead bike's rider, sending the machine skidding sideways into the path of the first transport. The column shuddered to a halt. The Serpent surged past her in a blur of muscle and scale, dropping from the ridge with a sound like thunder. It hit the lead transport full force, coils smashing into the reinforced hull. Metal shrieked as claws found purchase, and then its fangs drove deep into the side. The Venom worked instantly. Armor plates bubbled, split, and collapsed inward with a wet, sizzling hiss. The soldiers inside barely had time to scream before the acid-like toxin filled the compartment, dissolving flesh and metal alike. Ravina slid down the slope, landing behind the second transport. Her rifle barked again and again, each round punching through armor joints or severing exposed tubing. Sparks cascaded from a drone she hit midair, its shell folding in on itself before it exploded against the canyon wall. Through the link, she felt the Serpent's satisfaction, brief, sharp, before it was swallowed by an even deeper surge of rage. In her mind's eye, she saw flashes of the creature's torment, alien surgeons in cold rooms, drills sinking into living bone, chains biting into flesh. And then, layered over those memories, an intent so primal it made her hands tighten around her weapon. It didn't want to destroy the convoy. It wanted to exterminate every member of the species that had done this to it. "Stay with me," she muttered, not sure if she was warning the Serpent or herself. Then the air split open with a mechanical howl. From the far end of the ravine, 3 figures dropped from the sky, thrusters roaring, armor gleaming black and chrome. Cyborg mercenaries, the kind bred for relentless pursuit and surgical kills. And at their center, landing in a crouch that cracked the stone beneath his boots, was Commander Kale Drevik. Even through the visor she recognized him instantly, the deliberate precision of his movements, the scar slicing from jaw to collarbone, and a cold amusement in his stance. "Mai! Kong the throng, Ravina," his voice came through her external speakers, rich with derision. "No sa ma tra kai ma ka ga ta." She lowered her rifle just enough to meet his gaze head on. "Tau kun kun thung," she said, voice like steel. "Tau chu kan mai thua." Dravik laughed once, short and sharp, and signaled his team. The 2 cyborgs flanking him broke formation, one leaping toward the Serpent with a blade crackling with ion energy, the other charging at Ravina with a heavy rotary cannon spitting plasma rounds. She doled behind a slab of shattered rock as the plasma chewed through it, shards of molten stone raining down. Rolling out the other side, she snapped 2 quick shots into the cyborg's knee servos, forcing it to stagger. The Serpent lashed out at its attacker, tail sweeping him into the side of the transport with a bone-jarring crash. Dravik didn't move. He just watched, calculating, waiting for an opening. She knew that look. He was letting his men soften them up before making the kill himself. "Still hiding behind others to do your work," she shouted over the gunfire. His smirk widened. "Still pretending you're any different from me?" The serpent roared, a deep, resonant sound that made the walls of the ravine vibrate. Its venom splashed across the last transport, melting through the tank mounts. One of the venom containers ruptured, spilling a glowing green torrent into the dust. The air filled with a sharp, burning scent as the liquid ate into everything it touched. Dravik moved then, impossibly fast for his size, crossing the ground between them in a blur. Ravina barely got her rifle up before he slammed into her, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. His gauntleted hand closed around the barrel, wrenching it aside as he drove a knee toward her ribs. She twisted, letting the blow glance off her armor, then slammed her elbow into the joint of his cybernetic arm. "You're predictable," she hissed. "And you're stubborn," he countered, throwing her back into the canyon wall. Pain lanced through her shoulder, but she forced herself upright. In the corner of her vision, the serpent coiled around the last cyborg, crushing him until his exosuit buckled and his body went limp. But its attention was shifting, its mind pressing harder against hers, urging her to let it take control, to unleash everything and end this in one strike. She grit her teeth. If she let it in fully now, she didn't know if she'd be able to close the door again. Dravik advanced, his blade sliding free from its sheath, humming with lethal energy. "Last chance, Ravina. Step aside, and maybe I'll let you keep your mind when it's over." She raised her chin. "I'd rather lose it than serve you." The serpent struck. Its head darted forward, fangs snapping shut inches from Dravik's chest. He leapt back, blade slicing across its snout and sending a spray of blood onto the rocks. The creature hissed, the sound vibrating through her bones, and she felt its fury flood her senses, so sharp it was almost intoxicating. She used the distraction to lunge, driving the butt of her rifle into Dravik's side, then firing point blank into the gap between his chest plate and shoulder guard. The shot punched through, sparks erupting as he staggered back. The battlefield was chaos, metal shrieking under Venom's bite, drones spiraling out of the air, the ground itself pitted and smoking. Ravina felt the serpent's satisfaction mingled with her own breathless adrenaline, but beneath it, the hunger was still there, deeper and darker, whispering that this wasn't enough, that nothing short of total annihilation would be. Dravik straightened, smoke curling from the wound in his armor, his eyes locked on hers. "This isn't over," he said, voice low. She didn't look away. "No, it's just getting started." And then the serpent roared again, the sound rolling through the canyon like a promise of war. The outer hull of Vorthron's command station loomed like a black fortress suspended in the pale glow of the planet below. Ravina clung to the underbelly of a cargo skiff as it drifted toward the docking bay, her armor camouflaged against the scorched plating. The serpent's coiled form lay hidden within a mag-sealed crate on the skiff's deck, its breathing a slow, steady thrum in her mind. The station was the last place she wanted to be, but it was the only place she could get what she needed. The fleet's deployment codes. With them, she could bring every human warship in the sector crashing down on Vorthron's head. The docking clamps engaged with a heavy clang, and the bay doors opened to swallow the skiff whole. Ravina slipped from the underside before the crew even registered the arrival, moving like a shadow along the steel spine of the docking arm. The serpent's presence was calm but alert, feeding her flashes of corridors and alien patrol routes drawn from stolen. Glimpses in other minds. They had one chance, and it was going smoothly until it wasn't. She rounded a corner toward the central data core and froze. A shimmer in the air, barely perceptible, rippled across her visor's display. Cloak fields. The first shot came a heartbeat later, a spike of ion energy that hissed past her shoulder and punched into the wall behind her. "Ambush!" she hissed into the link, but even as the serpent reacted, bursting from its crate and smashing into the corridor, another ion bolt struck home. The crack of energy was followed by a sound she'd never heard from it before, a sharp, pained hiss that dissolved into silence. Through the bond she felt the impact, like a fist closing around her mind and squeezing until the link dimmed to a flicker. The serpent's massive body convulsed, muscles locking as the ion charge tore through its nervous system. It collapsed, coils twitching, the golden light in its eyes fading to a dull ember. Her chest tightened. The bond wasn't gone yet, but it was unraveling strand by strand. Panic wasn't an emotion. She allowed herself often, but it crept in now, icy and sharp. Through the fraying link came a single, raw emotion. Fear. Not of pain, not of death, of being left alone again. She dropped to one knee beside its head, her hand pressing to the warm scales between its eyes. "Stay with me," she said, but the response was faint, scattered thoughts like wind-blown ash. The corridor ahead lit up with approaching soldiers, their armor gleaming with the sigil of Vorthron's personal guard. Behind them, the bulkhead door to the data core began to seal. She had seconds to choose: run for the data and leave the Serpent to die, or gamble everything on saving it. Her fingers brushed the device clipped inside her chest plate, a neural sync module, banned by every military code for its irreversible consequences. Full spectrum synchronization would merge her mind entirely with the Serpent's, bridging every gap, sharing every thought, every instinct. It would save its life at the cost of her identity. If you do this, you will not be you. The Serpent's voice came through the flicker of the bond, deeper and slower than she'd ever heard it. She leaned closer, her own voice steady. I stopped being me when they killed everyone. Her thumb slid the module's safety cap free. The guards were almost on them now, weapons raised. She locked her gaze with the Serpent's dimming eyes. We finished this together, she said. The moment she pressed the module to the base of her skull, the world erupted in light. A surge of energy ripped through her spine, flooding her veins with fire. The bond exploded open, no longer a narrow channel but an ocean crashing through every barrier. She felt the Serpent's strength roaring back, the flex of every muscle, the thrum of every coil. In turn, it felt her every memory, every wound, every drop of the hatred she carried for Vorthrin. There was no difference between where she ended and it began. Her vision shifted, colors sharpened until she could see the individual vibrations of molecules in the air. The smell of ozone and alien sweat hit her like a second heartbeat. She rose to her feet, the Serpent's coils sliding protectively around her, both of them moving in perfect synchronization. The first guard fired, but before the shot left the barrel, they were already in motion. She darted forward, her steps matched to the whip of the Serpent's tail that tore through the soldier's armor like paper. Another tried to flank, but her body twisted instinctively, guided by senses that were not her own, and her blade found the seam in his helmet. The remaining guards hesitated. She saw their fear, tasted it. She wanted to savor it, to drown in it, but beneath the pull of the Serpent's primal instincts, her own purpose burned bright. The door to the data core was almost shut. They surged forward as one, smashing through the narrowing gap in a burst of force. Inside, the core chamber glowed with the cold blue of 100 data conduits. Technicians scrambled to flee, but none made it to the door. She tore the primary access panel free while the Serpent's coils wrapped around the central spire, fangs sinking into the coolant lines to overload the system. Streams of alien code spilled across her visor, and with a thought shared and amplified by the link, they downloaded the fleet's entire deployment network. The station shook as systems began to fail from the sabotage. Overhead alarms blared, and a voice spoke in the alien tongue, ordering evacuation. They turned to leave, moving as one through the smoke and chaos. In the reflection of a shattered console, she caught sight of herself, eyes no longer human, burning the same gold as the Serpent's, her skin faintly luminous under the armor. She didn't look away. "We are one," the Serpent said in her mind, and she knew it was no longer just speaking for itself. The bulkheads were closing, but they slipped through the narrowing corridors, cutting down any resistance with terrifying precision. Each movement was effortless. Her will was its will, and vice versa. The thought of undoing the merge never crossed her mind. She knew it couldn't be undone. As they burst back into the docking bay, Ravina's gaze locked on the hangar doors beyond which the Void and Vorthrin's fleet awaited. She felt the Serpent's anticipation thrumming through her bones. Their war had only just begun, but the choice had already been made. There was no going back. The Void burned with the wreckage of ships. "Arca!" 3 hung below, a pale blue moon shrouded in smoke from the orbital bombardment that had nearly ended it. Ravina and the Serpent moved through the black like a single predator, weaving between bursts of enemy fire. The neurobond pulsed with unified purpose, every maneuver flowing without thought. Her will was its strike, its instincts her shield. Ahead, Vorthrin's fleet loomed in tight formation, layered with overlapping shields and swarms of interceptors. They struck from beneath the shadow of a shattered cruiser. The Serpent's coils tightened around a dying skiff for momentum, hurling them into the heart of the formation. Ravina's enhanced senses picked out the weakest points in the enemy's armor. A single command in her mind, and the Serpent's fangs sank into the hull of a destroyer. The Venom pumped in, glowing green as it spread across the plating. Steel screamed under the chemical assault, buckling and folding inward until the entire ship burst apart in a silent bloom of debris. The enemy reacted instantly, redirecting fire, but the merged mine danced between beams and missile trails. They closed on the next warship, and another after that, until the formation began to falter. Panic flickered in the minds of the alien crews, a taste she could sense through the Serpent, sharp and electric. Ravina felt it fuel them, pushing the assault into something merciless. Through the chaos, she kept one thought anchored: protect the moon. Below, human refugee ships scrambled to evacuate those trapped on the surface, their small thrusters flaring desperately against the pull of gravity. She cut through a frigate, blocking their ascent, Venom eating its spine until it cracked in two. The refugee surged upward, slipping through the gap before it collapsed. A battleship turned interceptor, cannons charging for a full volley. She and the Serpent moved as one, slingshotting around the wreck of a corvette to strike from above. Their combined strength tore into the battleship's command deck. She saw faces through the viewport, wide-eyed, just before the Venom took them. The ship's lights died, and it drifted lifeless into the dark. One by one, Vorthren's ships fell, each destruction feeding the bond until it burned white-hot. The last vessel, a carrier, tried to flee toward the far edge of the system. They gave chase, the Serpent's muscles coiling with impossible speed, and Ravina's hand guiding the strike to the engine core. The explosion licked the void, scattering the remaining drones into dead silence. The battle was over. The path to Arca 3 was clear. Ravina hovered above the moon with the Serpent, the wreckage drifting around them. Relief radiated faintly from the surface below. Thousands of human lives saved. She should have felt victorious. Instead, the weight of stillness pressed against her. In the reflection of the Serpent's eyes, she saw what she had become. Her pupils were no longer human. They glowed gold, alive with something that had no place in a human body. Her breathing was calm, too calm, the pulse of adrenaline steady instead of fading. She didn't feel tired. She didn't feel like she could ever be tired again. The comms lit up with voices from Arca 3, some sobbing with gratitude, others speaking in hushed tones as if afraid she might hear them too clearly. She could hear the difference without trying. Thankfulness, yes, but laced with unease. They had seen what she had done. They had seen the way she moved in perfect unison with the Serpent, how her strike seemed less human skill and more alien precision. To them she was both savior and something they didn't understand, something they might one day fear. She floated in silence, the Serpent's coils resting lightly around her. In the bond, there was no judgment, no question, only the certainty of survival and the satisfaction of the hunt. But deep in her own thoughts, a whisper rose that she couldn't quiet. Victory, or the beginning of an age ruled by a new kind of monster. Her visor reflected the drifting debris, a graveyard of enemy ships she had helped destroy. The Serpent's mind brushed hers, an echo of the same image but painted with triumph knocked out. It didn't see the line between savior and destroyer. Maybe that line was already gone. Was this worth it? She asked herself, but the thought rippled into the bond, and the Serpent answered with a low, resonant hum that vibrated in her bones. It didn't use words, but she understood. To it, worth was survival, nothing more. Below, the moon turned slowly, blue seas glinting in the sunlight. Somewhere down there, the people she had saved were cheering. Somewhere else, they were whispering warnings about the golden-eyed thing in the sky. Ravina took one last look at the battlefield before guiding the Serpent away from the planet's orbit. She didn't know if she was leaving to protect them from what she had become, or to protect what she had become from them. The war ended in silence, but the silence was never empty. Wreckage drifted in slow arcs across the void, each torn hull a testament to the night the horde of Vorthren fell. The moon, Arca 3, spared from annihilation, glimmered in the starlight like it had been washed clean. Across the surface, human survivors rebuilt their homes, and in their stories a name began to spread, first in whispers, then in declarations. They called her the Serpent's rider, the Serpent's shadow, the one who commanded the beast. Some spoke the title with reverence, others with unease, but the legend grew all the same. In backroom taverns on mining colonies, traders swore they had seen her silhouette moving across the hull of a broken dreadnought, golden eyes burning through the dark. On border outposts, soldiers told of the night. The alien fleet dissolved into green fire, and how a single human and a creature of nightmare had cut through battleships like they were paper. In the slums of refugee worlds, children acted out the battle in dusty alleys, half of them pretending to be the golden-eyed savior, the other half playing the role of the beast. Ravina never returned to Arca 3. She stayed to the edges of known space, moving through shadow, striking where the remnants of Vorthren's allies tried to regroup. Her bond with the Serpent was unbreakable now, and every strike they made together fed into the myth. The stories never mentioned the cost. No one spoke of the way her voice had changed, lower now, resonating with something inhuman. No one described how her gaze lingered too long on things, as if she was measuring their strength, their fragility. In time, she knew the legend would overtake the truth completely. That was fine. The truth was a weight she carried alone. In the stolen quiet of deep space, she recorded a single message, not for glory, not for history, but as a warning. Her voice was steady as she spoke into the encrypted channel, knowing only those who needed to hear it would find it. Power is not the right to decide who lives and who dies. It is the courage to live with the choice that costs you everything. If saving the world means becoming the very thing it fears most, make sure that world is worth it. She paused then, the hum of the serpent's breath filling the silence between her words. Ask yourselves, she continued, if saving humanity required erasing every piece of yourself, would you do it? Would you still be human enough to care once it was done? She ended the transmission without a signature. Somewhere, the message would drift into the networks, bouncing between relay stations, slipping into the hands of a soldier about to make an impossible choice, or a leader staring down the cost of survival. Maybe they would understand. Maybe they wouldn't. The serpent shifted around her in the cramped cockpit of the stolen skiff, its coils resting against the cold metal. Through the bond, it sent to a fragment of its own truth, an image of a sky without chains, of drifting among the stars without fear. She accepted it, but didn't return one of her own. There were no chains on her now, but she knew the bond itself was a tether, one she had chosen willingly. She checked the navigation display. Beyond the rim of known space, faint signals pulsed, rumors of a warlord gathering power in the ruins of Vorthron's empire. Her fingers brushed the throttle, but she didn't move yet. The legend would follow her there, and the cycle would start again. The thought didn't bring her pride, only the quiet understanding that this was who she was now. Out there, people would keep telling the story of the serpent's rider. Some would make her a hero, others a monster. The truth was, she was both, and neither. She had saved a world, but she had also crossed a line no human could uncross. She could not return to who she had been before. In the dark between stars, she spoke one last time, not to the serpent, not to the galaxy, but to herself. If I have to be the monster, let me at least be the monster that keeps them safe. The serpent's golden eyes met hers, and for a moment she could no longer tell which thoughts were hers and which belonged to it. It didn't matter. They had made their choice together, and there was no going back. With a flick of her hand, the skiff's engines roared to life, carrying them both toward the next battle, toward the next world that would have to decide whether to welcome the serpent's rider or fear her, and in the wake of their passing, the legend would grow, carrying her warning and her question to anyone who dared listen. If to save humanity you must erase yourself, will you still be human enough to care?